Welcome back to KSTV. We're happy now to be joined by Justin Rowland from Rivals.com. And Justin, every time you're on, we have good news to talk about, it seems like. And yesterday, that good news was Blake Bone, a four-star wide receiver, gave his commitment to the Cats. Can you take us through, I guess, the scouting report on Blake and kind of how he fits in at Kentucky?
Yeah, it's a great fit. Bone is he's a four-star guy over on Rivals. I think we've got him ranked a little bit higher than some other people do, but I've heard good reviews from those that have seen him play. He's a really big guy, 6'5". He's a little bit wiry now, but he's got the kind of frame that's going to let him probably ultimately play around 200 pounds when he's really in his prime in college. So he's going to be a really big target, and that's what Kentucky needed. You know, they had gotten a couple of guys like Alex Montgomery and Jarvis Blue, maybe in the 6'1" to 6'2" range, but you know those aren't really big possession type receivers, and Bone is definitely that. I know Drew Barker is excited to have somebody that's going to be really big to throw to. He's going to move the chains, but he's also he's not just a first down machine. He's a guy that's going to get behind the defense and he's going to stretch the field in the vertical passing game. And I know that Kentucky just really needed to add some size at receiver. Earlier in the process, he had offers he had picked up offers from South Carolina and Auburn and Ole Miss, and Louisville wanted him at one time, and Nebraska. But Kentucky kind of just hung in there, and receiver was a position of need, and they identified him early, made him feel like he could come in and play right away, and that's what he went with. So I think it's a good fit for both.
Does it affect at all Braxton Berrios, who was another wide receiver that they're after? Does this tie in any way to his recruitment?
Well, Berrios is an interesting case because if you really look at the big picture of what Kentucky has at receiver, Berrios isn't a huge need right now. I mean, Kentucky has two slot guys on board in his class already in T.V. Williams and Garrett Johnson. When they took Garrett Johnson, I think that was maybe a sign that they weren't going to put all their eggs in that one basket and just sort of go all after Berrios, all or nothing. I think they're probably pretty content with what they have at slot. I do think they would take Berrios today or even down the road if he wanted to commit. But from what I'm hearing, there's a receiver from Ohio, Dorian Baker, that might be the top receiver left on the board, and he's kind of like the best available he's 6'3", 200 pounds, really explosive receiver in the open field. I think he's probably number one, maybe Berrios number two on the wish list. But Kentucky seems to be fading a little bit with Berrios. I think they still have an outside shot, but Oregon, South Carolina, and Miami seem to be the three schools that Berrios is leaning more towards now.
Who are the guys that are the other priorities right now? I know Matt Elam we hear about all the time, but who are the other guys that are in that mix still?
Well, they've got about 4 spots left to fill, unless my numbers are wrong. And I think Elam is definitely one that they're banking on. I think, I don't know that there's been a silent commitment or anything, but I think it's sort of understood that Kentucky's a heavy favorite at this point. That's why Alabama has offered so many defensive tackles. They need another receiver, and that will probably be either Dorian Baker or somebody else that they like. And there are plenty of options at receiver, so that's not a concern. They want another offensive lineman. They have to have another offensive lineman. And they're hoping to either flip Ohio State commit Marcellus Jones, which would be a huge feat because he goes to Glenville, which is where Ted Ginn Sr. coaches, and the ties to Ohio State there are obvious. And then they got a few junior college offensive linemen on the radar. And in that 4th spot, they really need a cornerback that can come in and can play right away. Initially, I was hearing that they just needed a high school cornerback to build some long-term depth, but I think Kentucky can be pretty good. Maybe not this year, but the year after, and they want to plug that hole at corner, get some immediate help there. And I think they'll take the best available at cornerback from here on out as well.
We saw early on from Mark Stoops a focus a little bit on junior college players, Zadarius Smith being one of the most prominent. Is that something as we get further and further removed from the Joker Phillips era that won't be as much of a focus for them?
I think you're right in saying junior college, that route has allowed them to maybe get some immediate help. But normally you don't expect junior college players to come in and be all-conference players. Zadarius Smith may prove to be the exception, but, they only have 2 years. Usually it takes them a year to get their feet wet. What junior college players are good for usually is building immediate depth. I don't think you're going to see Kentucky become like the Kansas State of the SEC and just recruit like 12 to 15 JUCOs a year. I think they're probably going to target between 2 and 3 most classes, which is par for the course for probably what most other SEC schools do.
When you look at this season ahead, recruiting, of course, has been the biggest success to this point for Mark Stoops, the things they're able to do. Is there a certain benchmark this season that in order to keep this 2014 intact or kind of keep this momentum going, do they have to reach a certain number of wins? Are there certain things offensively that you think they need to show this season in order to maybe keep this going as well as their recruiting right now?
Well, I think the staff has been very upfront with the guys that they've recruited. I don't think they've told any of them, hey, we're going to a bowl game this year. I don't think it's a difficult balance that Stoops has spoken to. You don't want to come out to the guys and say, hey, it's going to be a rough ride. We're not going to be very good. But by the same token, you don't want to set the bar too high. What they're telling the guys that they've recruited is watch how we respond to success and watch how we respond to adversity, because that's going to tell you about the kind of atmosphere and environment around the program and how the coaches and the players are interacting with one another. So they're going to want to show kids that the team is still fighting, they're still involved, they're not giving up, and there aren't any 40-0 losses to Vanderbilt towards the end of the season with like 10,000 people in the stands. I don't think that there's much of a concern when it comes to keeping this class together. I've spoken to everybody on a regular basis, and nobody is wavering. Even Denzel Ware, who was sort of thought of as, a kind of a flake earlier in the recruiting process. He's really hardened up, and he's very firm with the Cats right now. Like you said, it's more about continuing the recruiting momentum for next year. That's where maybe reaching a benchmark of at least 4 or 5 wins, double a win total from last year, would be something that they could really sell to those guys.
Well, we'll finish with this. This is kind of the question we've been asking everybody about the football season. What is, for Mark Stoops in year one, at the end of the year, what would he be able to say this was success? Maybe not necessarily wins, but just kind of the key things to come out of this season, which is expected to be difficult, and say it was still a success because of this.
I think some of the younger guys that he brought on from the last class are contributing, and there's a lot of hope for the future of the program in that respect, especially the receivers and some of the defensive players like Hatcher and McWilson and some of those guys. So they're kind of showing some success for the future. I think, again, at least 4 wins, 5 wins. I think 5 wins would give the program a lot of momentum right now, because that would include a couple of SEC wins, which are kind of tough to find at this point. And obviously keeping this class together. I think you do those 3 things, and, everybody praises Stoops for the job that he's done.
All right, Justin Rowland from Rivals.com. Always a pleasure, and appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Take care.